You remember exactly where you were on September 11th, 2001. The room, the light. Who told you first? Ask yourself how confident you are in that memory. Now consider this. In 1986, psychologist Ulrich Neisser asked more than 100 college students to write down, the morning after the Challenger explosion, exactly where they had been and how they heard the news. 2.5 years later, he asked them again. Over a third of the accounts had changed completely. Some students described different rooms, different people, different reactions than the ones they had written down themselves. When Neisser showed them their original notes, several insisted the new, false version was the true one. Their brains had not lost the memory. They had rebuilt it and then defended the rebuild as fact. This happens to everyone, constantly, in ways too small to notice. Your brain is not a camera. It never was. Every time you recall something, you are not opening a file and reading it back. You are reconstructing an event from fragments, filling the gaps with assumption, context, and whatever fits the story you already believe about yourself. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus proved this in a 1994 study where she convinced a quarter of adult participants they had once been lost in a shopping mall as a child, a memory that never happened. Participants didn't just agree with the suggestion, they added sensory detail. One remembered the flannel shirt of the man who supposedly found him. The shirt was invented on the spot, and it felt as real to him as any true memory in his head. The mechanism behind this got a physical explanation in 2000 when neuroscientist Karim Nader ran an experiment on rats at New York University. Nader trained rats to fear a specific tone by pairing it with a mild shock, then waited until the fear memory was fully formed and stored. Standard theory said a consolidated memory sat in the brain like a saved file, stable and untouchable. Nader played the tone again to reactivate the memory, then injected a protein synthesis blocker into the rat's amygdala within the next 6 hours. The fear vanished, not faded, gone, as if it had never been trained at all. The act of recalling the memory had made it chemically unstable again, briefly soft like wet clay before it rehardened into storage. Every time you remember something, you are not retrieving a fixed record. You are pulling it out, touching it, and putting a slightly different version back. Decades later, you have handled some memories so many times that almost nothing of the original event survives the edits. Here is where the story gets stranger. Your eyes are lying to you too, right now as you watch this. You have a blind spot in each eye, a small patch on your retina with no photoreceptors at all, created by the point where the optic nerve exits the eyeball. You should see a gap in your vision at all times. You don't, because your visual cortex fills that hole with a guess, stitched seamlessly from the surrounding pattern. Neuroscientist Vilayatanu Ramachandran demonstrated in the 1990s that people will fill a blind spot with grass texture if the surrounding field is a lawn, or with plaid if the surrounding field is a shirt. The brain doesn't leave blank space. It invents content and hands it to you labeled as observation. The same thing happens with attention, and this time the stakes are higher than most people assume. In 1999, Harvard researchers Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris ran an experiment that is now famous, though at the time nobody expected the result. They asked viewers to watch a video of people passing a basketball and count the passes. Partway through, a person in a full gorilla suit walked directly through the middle of the scene, stopped, thumped its chest, and walked off. Roughly half the viewers never saw it, not glanced past it, never registered it existed. Their eyes physically pointed at the gorilla for over a second, and their visual system discarded it because it wasn't relevant to the counting task. Simons later ran the same study on radiologists searching chest scans for nodules. 83% of them missed a gorilla, 5 times the size of a normal nodule planted in the corner of the image. Trained professionals, staring directly at cancer scans for a living, walked right past a gorilla in a lung. So the picture forming here is not one of occasional error. It's closer to a constant negotiation between what actually happened and what your brain decides is worth constructing. And once you see that, an older, stranger set of findings starts to make sense. In the 1960s and 70s, neuroscientists Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga studied patients whose corpus callosum, the bridge between the brain's 2 hemispheres, had been surgically cut to treat severe epilepsy. Because the left hemisphere controls language and the right does not, Gazzaniga could show an image to only the right eye, triggering an action from the right hemisphere, then ask the patient why they did it. The left hemisphere, which had no idea what the right hemisphere had seen, would not say, "I don't know." It would invent a plausible reason on the spot, delivered with total confidence. Show the right hemisphere a snow scene, and the patient's hand picks a shovel from a set of cards. Ask why. The left hemisphere, blind to the snow, answers instantly, "To clean out the chicken shed." Gazzaniga called this region of the brain the interpreter. Its job isn't to report truth. Its job is to generate a coherent narrative, no matter what raw material it has to work with. Here's the counterintuitive part, the piece that flips the whole picture upside down. All of this sounds like a flaw in the system, a bug your brain should be patched to fix. It isn't. Neuroscientist Anil Seth, building on decades of prior work in predictive processing, describes ordinary perception as a controlled hallucination. Your brain sits inside a dark, silent skull with no direct access to the world, only electrical signals arriving through your senses. To make sense of that thin stream of data fast enough to catch a thrown ball or dodge a swerving car, your brain runs a constant prediction engine, guessing what's out there, then checking the guess against incoming signal and correcting only when the mismatch is big enough to matter. What you experience as seeing, remembering, and knowing is mostly the prediction. Reality only gets a vote when it disagrees strongly enough with what your brain already expected. You can catch this prediction engine in the act with a simple demonstration. In 1976, psychologists Harry McGurk and John McDonald filmed a person mouthing the syllable "gay," while the audio track played the syllable "ba." Viewers who watched the video with sound on didn't hear either sound cleanly. Most heard "da," a syllable that was present in neither the video nor the audio, manufactured by the brain to reconcile two conflicting streams of sensory input. Close your eyes during the same clip and the illusion disappears instantly, because the visual prediction driving the merge is gone. Your brain isn't reporting what your ears received. It's reporting its best guess about what must have been said, given everything available to it in that instant. That's why eyewitness testimony, treated for over a century as the gold standard of courtroom evidence, has been the leading cause of wrongful conviction in cases later overturned by DNA evidence. The Innocence Project has tracked this since 1992. And eyewitness misidentification appears in a majority of their exonerations, well over 60% by their own count. Confident witnesses stood in courtrooms and described in vivid, specific, sincere detail events their brains had partly or entirely invented. They weren't lying. Lying requires knowing the truth and saying something else. Their interpreter had already handed them a finished story, and it felt exactly like memory because structurally, it was built from the same machinery memory always uses. Now bring this back to your own day because you are running this exact process right now and every day, not just in courtrooms or guerrilla experiments. Think about the last argument you had with someone close to you. You each walked away with a different, confident account of who said what and why. Neither of you was lying. Both of you were doing what Neisser's students did, what Loftus's participants did, what Gazzaniga's interpreter does by default. Filling gaps, resolving ambiguity, building a coherent story out of partial signal, then experiencing the result as plain fact. You do this when you remember a childhood summer as sunnier than it was. You do this when you're certain you lock the front door and drive back to check. You do this every time you scroll past information that contradicts what you already believe, and your brain quietly discards it the way those radiologists discarded the gorilla. Look at your phone right now, or think about the last hour you spent on it. A 2018 study led by MIT researchers Saroush Vosugi, Deb Roy, and Sinan Aral tracked roughly 126,000 stories spreading on Twitter between 2006 and 2017 and found that false stories reached 1,500 people 6 times faster than true ones. The researchers ruled out bots as the explanation. Humans were the ones retweeting falsehoods faster, because novel, emotionally charged information matches exactly what your prediction engine is tuned to flag as